and good evening, and this is Memorial Day. I think one of the greatest thrills for me yesterday evening was to go outside to get my ladder and to put my great big flag up in front of my house. You and I, we belong to the greatest nation on earth, and the very foundation of our government is we the people. You and I have rights and freedoms that are virtually unknown, even unimagined in many parts of the world. And these rights and these freedoms have come to us at a tremendous cost. On this Memorial Day, we express our appreciation to the men and women who are today serving in the armed forces, and to our veterans and the great work that they have done in helping us to remain free, many of whom are here tonight. And our hearts go out to the families of those who have paid the ultimate sacrifice that you and I might remain a free people. Everyone standing, please.
At the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watch were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air.
Please join me now in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You may be seated. The three-day battle at Gettysburg came to an end. Lee's army moved south, followed by a 17-mile-long wagon train, taking his wounded and dying back to Virginia. The little market town of Gettysburg, at that time only 2,500 residents, they were presented with 22,000 wounded and dying men on the battlefield. They lay in open fields, in ditches, haystacks, in the woods, churches, barns, houses. And permeating everything was the foul, overpowering stench of the unburied, both man and beast. One writer said, for miles around, you could smell Gettysburg. The casualty count for that battle, 42,000. These were just young men, many of whom were just boys, who came from the north, who came from the south. Pennsylvania Governor Andrew Curtin proposed to the other governors of the other northern states a national cemetery where their heroes could be buried, all grouped by states. There was a famous orator of the day whose name was Edward Everett, and he was invited to give the keynote address. And then, almost as an afterthought, an invitation went to President Lincoln, suggesting that he might come and honor the occasion by his presence. And the invitation said that he might wish to say a few words following Mr. Everett. Now it was only 4.5 months later. The pain, the wounds, the memories, the graves were still fresh, and hundreds came to the dedication. As the famous orator droned on, speaking of Greeks and Romans and heroes in ages past, groups of soldiers wandered away down Cemetery Ridge, and some walked over to Little Round Top. They talked quietly among themselves about what had happened there, about the tragedy that had occurred and their part in this. The 2-hour oration came to an end, and the applause died away. And then a tall man in a black frock coat stood, slowly stepped up on the wooden platform, placed his hands on the unfinished wood rail, and gazed out at all of those graves all over the hillside. He then looked into the sad eyes of mothers and children and wives. And then for a long time, he looked into the battle-worn faces of those who had fought in that terrible battle. And then slowly and deliberately, he said,
80 107 years ago, our fathers brought forth upon this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met here on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as the final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this, but in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here have consecrated it, far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
Oh, beautiful, for spacious skies, for amber waves of gray, for purple mountain majesty, above the fruited plain. America, God shed His grace on thee, and crowned thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea. Oh, beautiful, for heroes proved in liberating strife, who more than self their country loved, and mercy more than life. America, America,
I walked through a country courthouse square, and on a park bench, there was an old man sitting there. I said, "Your courthouse, it's kind of run down." He said, "No." Said, "It's good enough for our little town." I said, "Your old flagpole looks like it's leaning a bit. And that sure is a ragged old flag hanging on it." He said, "Come on and have a seat." So I sat down and I said, "Son, I don't like to brag, but we're kind of proud of that ragged old flag. You see, it got a little tear, a little hole in it there when Washington carried it across the Delaware. It got powder burned the night Francis Scott Key sat watching it and writing, 'Oh, say, can you see?' It almost fell at the Alamo beside the Texas flag. But she waved on through. It got cut with a sword in Chancellorsville. Got cut again at Shiloh Hill. And then there was Robert E. Lee and Beauregard and Bragg, and the south wind blew rather hard on that ragged old flag. On Flanders Field in World War I, she took a bad hit from a Bertha gun. She turned blood red in World War II. She hung limp and low by the time that one was through. She was in Korea and she was in Vietnam, because she went wherever she was sent by Uncle Sam. The Native Americans, the blacks, the yellows, the whites, they all shed red blood for the stars and the stripes. And here in her own good land, she's been abused, burned, dishonored, denied, and refused. And the very government for which she stands has been scandalized throughout the land. And she's getting threadbare. She's wearing kind of thin. But you know, she's in pretty good shape for the shape that she's in. She's been through the fire before, but she can take a whole lot more. So we raise her up every morning. We bring her down every night. We don't let her touch the ground. And we fold her up just right. You know, on second thought, I do like to brag, because I'm proud of that ragged old flag.